My journey through feudal Japan began on this dusty old road. The way the Japanese people stared at me was as though they'd never seen anyone like me before. But to be fair, I'd also never seen anyone quite like them either. They were a fascinatingly unique people. There was, however, one woman in an exquisitely crafted pink silk floral dress that had a strange air about her. I loved her eyebrows. As we walked further down the old cobblestone road, the sound of hooves echoed in the distance, the faces of nearby soldiers and peasants alike, suddenly panicking, desperately trying to find the optimal place to throw themselves face first on the dusty ground. It was then that I saw him. The ultimate Japanese dreamboat of the Sengoku era, Oda Nobunaga. He had just returned from a hunt by himself, and as he dismounted his horse, regal armor shining in the midday sun, I realized that the legends were all true. He was undoubtedly John Leguizamo. And his valiant steed, the epitome of equestrian masculinity, shoes adorable beyond words, and a ginormous hog on his back, seemingly light as a feather. Nobunaga's son and the lady with the gravitationally defiant eyebrows whispered something to one another, then looked at me. Several minutes passed as we waited outside of Nobunaga's castle for him to change into his pajamas. Then suddenly the doors burst open and a man in spectacular gold and black raiment told us that Nobunaga was ready to see us. There was, however, a condition, and that condition was that I was to join them. Yes, Nobunaga-san had taken an interest in me and wanted to speak to me personally. The priests weren't happy, but they had no choice but to agree. As we knelt before His Majestical Highness, he asked us what we wanted. Apparently, we had come requesting permission to allow our missionaries to walk freely around the lands in return for a nice, succulent European chair. In actual fact, however, our missionaries had already begun their work long before our audience with Nobunaga-san. The problem with this, though, was that it increased the likelihood of our heads being separated from our bodies by approximately 101%. It was precisely at that moment that my hitman senses instinctively started to kick in as I immediately identified every threat in the room. Nobunaga, being the great warrior and tactician that he was, immediately noticed that I noticed things that most other people would never notice, and said in passing how grand it would be if I could understand him. Now, usually I would say nothing, but I was feeling particularly brave and threw caution to the wind, revealing that I was actually fluent in English, Portuguese, Japanese, and my native language. I was also extremely jacked, handsome, and had an IQ of 277. This pleased Nobunaga-san, and so he granted permission to the missionaries to continue doing what they were doing and to keep their heads in exchange for my military services. The priest agreed to the conditions, knowing he had no say in the matter anyway, and warned Nobunaga that the only thing I would be good for was carrying his sandals. Nobunaga-san, however, had an eye for greatness and said that under him even a sandal bearer could become lord. My eyes nearly popped out of my head as I tried to do the mental gymnastics required to understand the logistics behind what would be involved if I were to become lord. How would I command the stars and the planets? What about the space-time continuum? Did I really want to live forever? But I misunderstood. He actually meant feudal lord, not the literal lord of heaven and earth. And before I knew, I was on the battlefield chopping down innocent peasants tending to their rice fields in the name of unification. This was what I did now. I was the right hand of Nobunaga-san, and anyone that stood in his way ate my blade. It was brutal, but I reconciled myself to my new reality by lopping off the heads of dissenters in the most bombastically dramatic ways possible. But you see, I was a good man at heart, and I would immediately be filled with an overwhelming sense of guilt and regret, often picking up my enemies and helping them relocate their heads, which had a tendency of rolling into nearby lakes or down a hill. As my liege and I Rendes vows to take in the gloriously warm summer's night together, he told me that if I could staunch my way through a couple of solid wood doors, that he would treat me to a nice succulent Japanese meal. And so I asked him if it would be cooked or raw. He said raw. I said no, but that I'd show those doors who was boss anyway. To show his gratitude, he told me, just between him and I, that he was indeed John Leguizamo in disguise. I told him that everybody already knew that, and that he wasn't fooling anybody. With that out of the way, I then exerted my masculine aura by marching down an entire army, flaming arrows whizzing past my head without so much as a flinch. Then I channeled the power of the Chicago Bulls contained within my helmet and crash-tackled the solid wooden door into a million pieces. As soon as I entered the courtyard, however, some suspicious-looking character with a mask called Shinobi ran at me, so I kicked him as hard as I could in the testicles, yeeting him approximately 10 meters in the opposite direction. With one more door standing between me and a succulent meal I didn't want, I did what they hired me to do, and upset every lumberjack in my area with this with this one simple trick. My mission was a resounding success. In saying that, however, I struggled to reconcile the difference between pursuing harmony through force and senseless violence. One thing was certain, however. I was now invested in Yasuke's story and how he would navigate the complexities of being a foreign samurai in Japan under one of the most significant figures in Japanese history. But then they decided to pull that stupid animus nonsense, completely destroying the immersion and reminding me that nothing in this story was actually happening and that it was all part of some sci-fi VR genetic memory phooey. Not only that, but they did the old bait and switch, taking Yasuke and serving up the most generic character and generic revenge plot that has been done to death in basically every story and medium ever since the beginning of time. What I gathered was that the girl, Naoe the ninja, was fighting alongside her father to protect her village from the raiding samurai army, which coincidentally was led by Mr. Leguizamo and Yasuke by his side. To be fair, there was definitely potential for the story to eventuate into something interesting if written well, but I never actually got that far. Still, I was hopeful that if I rushed through this part of the game, I could get back to Yasuke's story, but upon further investigation online, it sounded like you needed to progress at least 6 hours into the story until you're able to meet him again. As I rode into my village to stop the raiding samurai, a masked, unnamed ninja, who I can only assume was a nod to Hattori Hanzo, drove his katana through a downed enemy's back, and I completely misjudged the distance between me and my enemy, then stabbed him right in the neck. My quest, however, was to retrieve the piggy bank that my father had left in the strange tomb just outside the village. He told me there was enough money inside now to buy 1 boiled egg and a can of Boss coffee from the local convenience store. Oh, I was so excited I could practically taste the salty, gooey, perfectly cooked runny yolk in the middle and smell the probably expired Arabica coffee beans, but then a member of the feudal Japanese national baseball team showed up and hit me for a home run right in the face. As I lay on the floor, battered, bruised and bleeding, my old man showed up, carrying me to a nearby village for urgent medical attention. When I finally came to, I had no idea where I was, but my father had clearly been injured and was laying unconscious next to me. The nice lady who I hadn't met before told me that the only course of action in such a situation that made any sense was to infiltrate the nearby castle, recover the piggy bank, kill everyone inside, and then get that boiled egg and can of coffee because I deserved it. And she was right, I did. As I approached the castle, the ominous black clouds hanging overhead warned me that things were almost certainly going to go from bad to worse. But I was optimistically foolish and kept pushing forward. Before entering the castle though, I decided to do a couple of happy laps in the freezing cold moat outside to warm up for the offensively excessive amount of bloodshed and carnage that was about to ensue. I dove in literally head first, then grabbed the standing up sleeping guy and proceeded to walk him around like a dog for about 30 seconds before finally choking him out cold and then stabbing him anyway once he was already incapacitated. I then chucked a knife at this unsuspecting lumberjack and hopped my way across this sketchy-looking roof before jumping down and shanking the clueless boatswain beneath me. I then reclaimed the box that was right next to him, only to discover that that was not my piggy bank. Exhausted and disappointed, I hopped into a nearby coffin for a quick snooze, then woke up feeling like $1,000,000, ready for the game to throw another inescapable bamboozle my way. First, however, I had to decimate the massive army of samurai that was guarding the real piggy bank, including but not limited to Yoshihiro. As it turned out, however, he was not the greatest of heroes after all. Having reclaimed my infamous piggy bank, I launched myself off the walls and into the safety of the dark forest. I couldn't believe it. I'd done it. The seemingly impossible was now possible. Yes! I mean, no. Because then I got shot. You see, the same baseball players that smashed my head in and stole my piggy bank the first time had bamboozled me for a second time now, and this time they were bound to finish the job. But then, out of nowhere, my father came Naruto running out of the woods, slashing them both with the lightning-fast speed of Mr. Miyagi and his chopsticks. But alas, epic bamboozles always happen in threes, don't they? And so, as what can only be described as nothing but pure genius, the Payday Gang emerged from the foggy nighttime woods. Hops readied his blade and charged up his special move before running towards the army of 11 head first. He was a brave and valiant man, but unfortunately he was no match for 11 well-seasoned bank robbers. They then took my piggy bank yet again and left me and my father for dead. I was absolutely It had been a really, really long night, and that difference of opacity in the game's logo only made it worse. The next morning I was woken by the sun's gentle light cascading across my beat-up face. It appeared that I was at Raiden's house, and that my father was actually Liu Kang. I couldn't believe it. Not only that, but he told me that now I had been chosen to defend the realm of Earth in a tournament called Mortal Kombat. I then skipped everything he said and had no idea what was going on ever again.